Welcome to Moving People Forward with Mark Elfstrand. This program is a series of conversations on commonly seen challenges in everyday people's lives. We hope you'll be inspired by the stories you hear today. Perhaps you know of someone who would also benefit. Be sure to share the program link with a friend. Now, here's Mark.
You know, a good education can help us unlock a lot of the mysteries about life. One of the thorniest issues that we deal with in our world today is understanding the Arab-Israeli conflict. And that is the title of one of the books that my guest on our program today is going to discuss. It's also one of the oldest conflicts, of course, in the world. Plus, anti-Semitism still remains alive today in many nations. Witness the tragic killings in recent years in various U.S. cities. We'll be talking about that. With me on Moving People Forward is Dr. Michael Rydelnik. My guest is Professor of Jewish Studies at the Moody Bible Institute. He is also the host and Bible teacher on Open Line with Dr. Michael Rydelnik, and he answers listeners' Bible questions every Saturday morning on more than 200 stations across America. And a really good guy. Dr. Michael Rydelnik, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here. Thank you.
You have an interesting family history, as a matter of fact. You are the son of Holocaust survivors. Just kind of walk through, what was that experience like for you as a young guy growing up?
Well, some survivors of the Holocaust never talk about their experience with their kids. My parents only talked about it. It was a nonstop conversation in our house. One of my earliest memories was my parents were sitting around a dining room table with some of their friends who were also survivors, and this Jewish style of communication that's called cooperative overlapping.
Okay.
We show our interest by talking over each other and say, hey, you think that's something? What about this? I remember playing with my guys on the floor, and this is really one of my earliest memories. I heard my mom discussing her eye surgery, that they took out her tear ducts to see how, experimental surgery, to see how a person would moisturize their eyes and cry without tear ducts. And so as she talked about it, I passed out. And when you're unconscious like that from fainting, you can still hear things. And I remember hearing my mom saying, get the smelling salts, he's passed out again. So Again, so apparently that was not the first time. And so they would talk about this stuff in front of me, and it was just the most normal thing in my family. And I remember once when I was about 9, complaining about the dinner my mom had made. My dad sat me down and talked about what food was like in concentration camp. And so to me, really much of my life was designed saying, how could I lessen my parents' suffering, because they had indeed suffered so much. And I think that's one of the things that has really marked me for life in terms of growing up with parents of survivors. It's very hard to complain about anything.
Yeah, because they can one up you on everything, right?
Yeah, it's you think about this is bad, but it's not what they went through.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, at some point in your life journey, you came to trust in Yeshua as the Messiah. I'm assuming that was not the story that was told in your home growing up.
No, in fact, I was in high school when my mom went public. She had been a secret follower of Yeshua since before the war. And she married my dad after the war. My dad was left without any family. He had remarried, and his wife died in childbirth. It was too soon after the war to have a child. She was another survivor. My mom was working as a nurse in this hospital in Berlin, and felt sorry for him. My dad needed someone to marry him to care for this premature baby, my brother, and so they married. And then after they married, he forbade her ever to tell about her faith. And so she was a secret follower of Yeshua, not following so closely, but secretly believed in him. And then in high school, when I was in high school, she went public. And of course, my dad divorced her, and I argued, fought with her, and then really tried very hard to convince her not to believe. Then I went after the woman who was teaching her the Bible. And it was through interacting with this woman, trying to prove her wrong, that I became convinced that her presentation of Messianic prophecy was more accurate than my understanding of it.
Wow. Well, then you made a decision to attend the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Why that school?
I look back on it, I think, what in the world was I thinking? It turned out great, but I was the man who was teaching me the Bible and kind of helping me in my growth. He was discipling me, mentoring me, and he is a Moody grad in Jewish studies. And he kept saying, you need to go study with Louis Goldberg. And I had won a scholarship, New York State Region Scholarship. I could have gone to any New York school, free of charge.
Yeah.
And he, no, go to Moody, go to Moody, go to Moody. I said, they don't even offer degrees. At the time, it was a 3-year diploma. And he says, you got to go to Moody, you'll get your degree somewhere else. And I think I just got badgered into going there, and I got accepted at various schools, but then I said, I really want to study the Bible. That's really what I want to do. So I went there, and Louis Goldberg was the Jewish studies professor. I got to study Jewish studies with him, and I got there, and right away, I went sight unseen. Unlike today, when parents take their kids, I flew into Chicago, grabbed a cab at O'Hare Airport, went down to Moody with my duffel bag and suitcase, and started college.
Well, you were a kid from Brooklyn, so living in a big city was
it seemed kind of small to me.
Yeah,
Chicago,
nothing to you,
it
right?
wasn't a big deal. I had a roommate from a small town in Ohio. He'd walk around, look at the buildings, and I say, "You think this is something?" Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, your doctoral dissertation was on the hope of the Hebrew Bible. So, talk about what kind of led you down that path.
Well, I was obviously Messianic Prophecy, the predictions of the Messiah in the Old Testament, had profound influence on me in making me become a follower of Yeshua. And then in the ministry I led a Messianic congregation. I worked with Chosen People Ministries, talking with Jewish people about the Messiah. And over and over and over, Messianic prophecy was crucial. And I felt that when I went through seminary, I actually was a New Testament major, because too many of the Old Testament guys were beginning to minimize the significance or even denying the existence of Old Testament Messianic prediction.
I see.
So when I finished my doctoral work, I was thinking, what can I do to sort of prop up, strengthen the idea that there really is a clear Messianic hope in the Hebrew Bible? And so that's what I chose to do my research on.
Okay, so this new book
Yeah.
that I'm holding, it really is new. This just came out in the last few weeks. The Moody Handbook of Messianic Prophecy. And this is a pretty weighty tome that you've put together as well. So how many prophecies all told can we attribute?
I think this covers about 85 of them.
85, okay.
People, initially the marketing department wanted to say every Messianic prophecy. And I said, no, say virtually every.
Virtually every.
Because there are some that
that
some people might argue and say it is Messianic, and I might say it's not.
Yeah.
Then there's others I might not even be aware of.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that I felt was so crucial. When Jesus talked to the disciples in Luke 24, and he says that everything written about me in the law and the prophets and the Psalms was revealed. The truth of it is that I don't think he just meant individual passages. I think he meant down to the DNA level, the themes of the books, the ideas of the books, not just individual predictive passages. So, for example, some might say that 1st, 2nd Kings, what Messianic hope is there? Well, if you read the whole story, every king fails. And every king, even the good ones, end up failing.
Right.
That's kind of amazing,
Right.
And at the end of the book, Israel's in captivity, and the Davidic promise has never been fulfilled. So this whole story is to show us, I call 1st, 2nd Kings, a history of Messianic miscalculations. Because every Davidic king is raised up, and you think, is he the one? Mm-hmm. No. And at the end of the book, he's not even, he hasn't come yet. So keep looking. So even though someone might say there's no individual Messianic passage in 1st, 2nd Kings, it makes sense to see the whole book as pointing ultimately to keep looking for that Messianic king.
Okay, well, we're going to take a time out here on our program, a short break, and then we're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Michael Rydelnik, Professor of Jewish Studies at the Moody Bible Institute. He's also an author and a radio talk show host. And coming up in just a moment, we're going to talk about two rather difficult issues, understanding the Arab-Israeli crisis and also anti-Semitism, in just a moment.
God is our safe place and our strength. He is always our help when we are in trouble. This word of God in Psalm 46:1 says it all. God is our safe place. He is our strength. He is our help when we are in trouble. Whenever and wherever we are invited, nationally or internationally, Lutheran Church Charity's mission is to bring the mercy, compassion, presence, and proclamation of Jesus Christ to those who are suffering and in need. LCC is a ministry of presence, to be present with Jesus, to lift up people in times of joy and sorrow, in prayer, and by passing through donations of dollar per dollar to those in need. Through our canine ministries, we respond and deploy with boots on the ground and paws within 24 hours, often sooner, of any crisis or disaster situation we're invited into. You see, for us, the bottom line is making a difference by being present. For people who are suffering and in need with that mercy, compassion, presence of Jesus Christ. Thank you again for allowing us the privilege to stand alongside and serve others. Jesus and your partnership make that possible to touch thousands of lives.
This is Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand, and we're about to discuss a very difficult issue in our world today, understanding the Arab-Israeli conflict. My guest is Dr. Michael Rydelnik, Moody Bible Institute professor, also author and radio talk show host. So you've written a book by that title. Mm-hmm. I don't know, couldn't that have been a whole library of books?
Yeah, that's why I was trying to make it easily accessible.
Right.
So that, in fact, I tried very hard when I was writing that book to keep in mind I wrote a sort of a profile of my audience.
Okay.
And I was thinking about a young mom who has a couple little kids.
Yeah.
And she's trying to keep her house, and she keeps hearing on the news conflict, and she's thinking, why can't they get along?
Right.
And she doesn't have the whole history background and all that. And I was just trying to give her the basics so that she could understand why this conflict exists, both historically and the reason it goes beyond the headlines, biblically and theologically.
Okay, so in our world today, we're seeing a shift in the American attitudes towards Israel. And it's almost like Israel is losing a major friend. Mm-hmm. What has happened in the process of understanding that conflict that is changing people's minds about the Arab world?
Well, I actually think most Americans still have a very positive view of Israel. What we're seeing is the extremes of both political sides, the extreme left
right.
and the extreme right are the ones that are being outspoken in their opposition to Israel. But I don't think the center and the center right, center left really are. I think that it's just the extremes. Nevertheless, I think one of the reasons that people are on these extremes, they represent Israel in an untrue way. There's a lot of things that people think. They think that you hear things like, oh, Israel's committing genocide of the Palestinians. Of course, that's not true. That's a falsehood. It's propaganda. And in fact, the Palestinians, the Arab Israelis or Palestinians who live in Israel proper, when asked if it's possible, if there would be a Palestinian state, would you want to go live in it? Or would you want the Palestinian Authority to get control of Israel?
Right.
They say no.
Yeah.
They have far more freedom, far more opportunity living under Israel. There's no genocide. So a lot of things happen. Israel's a colonialist enterprise. Well, where's the home country, I always say. Colonialism is you come from another country and go there and then you send stuff back to the home country. There's no colonialist enterprise. It's an indigenous people group, people who have lived in Israel who return to where they always lived. And so there are many misunderstandings and misapprehensions, and as a result, I think people are using that. And I think if I could criticize Israel, they're terrible at answering these kind of propagandistic claims.
Is everything about the real estate?
No. No, I think the continued tension there has more to do with religion than real estate, and as religion looks at real estate. You see, Islam teaches that once a land has been under Islamic control, it can never be given up. And although the local population never had control of what was then called Palestine, in fact, the last indigenous people group to have sovereignty in that area of the world were the Jews. In the 2nd century BC, it was called the Hasmonean era. And then the Romans came, and then after the Romans came the Byzantines. After the Byzantines came an Arab conquest where Jewish people in the land and all the people in the land were governed from either Baghdad or Cairo. Then ultimately you get the Turkish control, another Muslim area, but they were from Istanbul, controlling the land, and then the British, and then finally Israel comes into existence. And so because it had been under Islamic control, local, the idea that it can be given up, like Hamas or Hezbollah, they do not believe it can be under anything else, and it must be fought for, so that there can't even be this little sliver of land under Jewish control rather than Islamic.
So if you were like Mr. Peace Negotiator, would you just walk in and then go, this is an unresolvable conflict because we have two mindsets which are irreconcilable?
Well, I do think that there are some Islamic scholars that seem to say that even in the Quran, that there is an understanding that that land was a land for the Jewish people. And so I would try and help, not that I think that radical Muslims would listen to me,
right,
but I would help them to see that. I think that right now we're beginning to see there's a sort of a secret entente between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and other Gulf nations, where they're coming to that conclusion. And the reason is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and so Israel is considered a great protection against the encroaching Iranian empire that Iran's trying to control the Middle East. So the Saudi Arabians feel very threatened by that. Jordan feels threatened by that. Egypt feels threatened by that. And Israel has the strongest military. They see Israel as an ally. So there's this kind of secret group of, I call it a secret entente, of people of nations that are saying, listen, it's good that the Jews have taken the land.
Now, let's talk about the problem of anti-Semitism in the world. Where are the real flashpoints? We know that there's incidents in our country, but is it happening in Europe to a much greater degree?
Yeah, in France, there are a number of people who, like a Holocaust survivor, who was just flung from her balcony by
in France.
In France, in Paris. A Muslim man came into her apartment, said he was enraged because she was Jewish, and flung her off her balcony. And the strange thing is he was just released because of temporary insanity. It's terrible. But nevertheless, in France it's so bad that if you go to, so many French Jews are leaving to go back to Israel. And so you go to Netanya, which is north of Tel Aviv, and all you hear is French being spoken on the streets. Yeah, so many. And of course, there was a situation in the recent election in Great Britain. Jeremy Corbyn, not only was he tolerating anti-Semitism within Labour, but here's a man who laid a wreath on the graves of the murderers of the Israeli Olympic athletes in 1972. Remember those?
Yeah, sure.
When he went to the graves of those who had done the murdering and laid a wreath. And so how is that not anti-Semitic, to honor murderers? So yeah, there's a growing problem of that on the radical left in Great Britain. In France, it is of a different sort, mostly because there are so many French Moroccans who have come to live in France. There's a great deal of anti-Semitism in that segment.
Do you see
it's in Germany too? With
Germany, definitely. Yeah. So do you see? Do you have concerns over where our government might be headed, certain leaders within our government, and maybe that same kind of deep sense of anti-Semitism?
I think that the squad, the 4 congresswomen,
Right.
3 of the 4 of them have been quite outspokenly anti-Semitic. The one from Michigan, Rashida Tlaib, I think her name is, she has said some blatantly anti-Jewish things. Omar Ilan has used all sorts of gross anti-Semitic statements. She's even apologized for them in a backhanded sort of way. But and then, of course, AOC, she just says whatever, and doesn't really care, and says really terrible things. So I think on the radical left in our government, there's this attitude, and the alt-right, which were big backers of President Trump, they also, anyone that disagreed with them or with President Trump, if they were Jewish, even if they were conservatives, they, like Ben Shapiro, got all sorts of death threats and things like that. So yeah, I do think that the bigger issue, and what we saw in the Pittsburgh shooting, this was
the synagogue there.
Yeah, this was someone from the radical right.
Yeah.
And the shooting just recently at the market in Jersey City, obviously from a more radical left kind of perspective. And so I do think we've got a problem. I'm concerned about our government, and I am, there are some people who have objected to this. I don't understand it, but I appreciate that the president has issued an executive order.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything that Donald Trump does. I'm not trying to, but at least look at this and say, issuing this executive order to protect students on campus, Jewish students on campus, more than 50% have said they've encountered really hostile anti-Semitism. There's attempts to keep Jewish students off student councils on the universities. It's become blatant on our campuses.
So it was a good move.
Oh, it was a very good move. I think it's very smart.
Well, regrettably, our time has quickly gone by, and we could talk about a lot of great things. And by the way, in case you didn't get it earlier, just want to make sure you can kind of see that this is Dr. Rydelnik's newest, the Moody Handbook of Messianic Prophecy. And you can find this, I'm sure, on Amazon, also at Moody.edu.
Your favorite online bookseller.
Yeah, and maybe even at your website too, right?
No, I just send them back to Amazon.
Okay, but you do Israel tours.
I do Israel tours, and they're kind of full, but they go to michaelrydelnik.org. You can find anything that you're looking for.
Okay, very good. Hey, thanks so much for making time to come and give us a good briefing on very difficult issues.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and blessings to you as you continue to serve the kingdom. Well, that's our program for today. As the sages have told us, grow in wisdom, think humbly of yourself, and love one another. May it be so with you. Join me next time for more of Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand.